phones, Babylons can't crack the code.
Every year, going into each college football season, there is always a number of players that are getting talked about every day in the media and are being hyped up to be the top player in college football and maybe even Heisman winners. In today's video, I'm going to be looking at people that are underrated heading into 2022 that should be talked about more. Before I move on, remember to smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Now let's get into it. The first player that I'm going to be talking about in today's video is Purdue quarterback Aidan O'Connell. Aidan O'Connell is coming off a good campaign in 2021, in which in 12 games played, he completed 72% of his passes, threw for 3,712 yards, 28 touchdowns, and only 11 interceptions. He also accounted for 1 rushing touchdown on the ground, and even helped lead Purdue to a 9-4 season, which is quite the solid season at that. Aidan O'Connell was also a second-team All-Big Ten member in 2021. When people talk about some of the top quarterbacks in college football, it seems like one of them that isn't mentioned very often is Purdue quarterback Aidan O'Connell. And Aidan O'Connell, in my opinion, is a quarterback that deserves more respect on his name. He is coming off quite the season at Purdue, and he has a shot to not only build off of his strong 21 campaign and remain one of the top quarterbacks in the Big Ten, but potentially even lead Purdue to a great season in 2022 yet again. Sticking with the quarterback position, the next player that I'm going to be talking about in today's video that I think is underrated heading into 2022 is Louisville quarterback Malik Cunningham. Malik Cunningham had an amazing season in 2021, as in 13 games for the Cardinals, he completed 62% of his passes, threw for almost 3,000 yards, throwing for 2,941 yards, 19 touchdown passes through the air, and only 6 interceptions. On the ground, he was amazing, as he rushed for over 1,000 yards, rushing for 1,031 yards, averaging 6 yards per carry, and accounted for a total of 20 touchdowns on the ground. When talking about Malik Cunningham, in my opinion, I believe he's one of the best quarterbacks in the nation, and I believe he deserves to be talked about like he's one of the best in the nation. I believe he's someone that is a pretty good passer, and he's someone that is probably the best dual threat quarterback in the nation right now, as talking for quarterbacks heading in to the 2022 season. And I believe maybe if Louisville surprised some people in 2022, like I believe they can, maybe Malik Cunningham's finally going to get some of the credit that he deserves as being seen as one of the best quarterbacks in the sport of college football right now. Switching it over to the defensive side of the ball now, we're going to be taking a look at a linebacker that was one of the more key pieces to a team that was in the college football playoff in 2021, and that's none other than Cincinnati linebacker Deshawn Pace. Deshawn Pace had a breakout campaign in 2021, as in 14 games for the Bearcats, he had 95 total tackles, 9.5 tackles for loss, half a sack, 4 interceptions, 2 pass deflections, and 1 fumble recovery. When talking about Deshawn Pace heading into 2022, in my opinion, he may not be a name that's talked about enough in college football. This is a guy who is coming off a great 21 season, and in my opinion, I don't think he's talked about enough, which makes sense why he's in this video. He's someone that I believe is going to make an even bigger jump in his game in 2022, and I believe he's going to start getting more nationally recognized by everybody. Cincinnati is losing a little bit of star power on their defense in 2022, and I believe Deshawn Pace is only going to get better, and people are going to recognize him as a top defensive player at Cincinnati. Going back to the offensive side of the ball, the next player I'm going to be taking a look at is wide receiver from Boston College, Zay Flowers. In 2021, Zay Flowers was the leading receiver for Boston College, and he had a good season, as in 12 games played, he recorded 44 receptions for 746 yards, averaging 17 yards per reception and 5 touchdowns through the air. It's even more impressive knowing that for over half the season, Boston College was playing with their backup quarterback and not their starter, since the starting quarterback fell down with injury about halfway through. Zay Flowers is a receiver that a lot of people know is very talented and very good, as he's been the lead receiver for Boston College for 2 seasons now, and he's put up back-to-back years with very productive numbers. but I believe he should be talked about more heading into 2022 as one of the top receivers in college football. I'm not saying he's going to be winning the Biletnikoff or even be a finalist for the Biletnikoff Award, but if he stays healthy and quarterbacks can stay healthy at Boston College, I don't see how Zay Flowers will not have his biggest season yet in 2022. I believe he's about to make even more people know his name and know his wrath for Boston College in this 22 campaign, and I would keep your eye out for Zay Flowers in 2022. Sticking with the ACC for this next player, the next player that I'm going to be talking about is running back from Syracuse, Sean Tucker. Sean Tucker is coming off quite the 21 campaign, as he was a first-team All-ACC member and even an All-American in 2021. In 12 games played, he rushed for 1,496 yards, averaged 6 yards a carry, and had 12 total touchdowns on the ground, and even accounted for 2 total touchdowns and 255 receiving yards through the air. Yet again, when people talk about top 5 running backs in college football, or even some of the top running back names in college football heading into 2022, like Bijan Robinson, Deuce Vaughn, and even Zach Evans, those are 3 names that are mentioned all the time. A name that I don't think is mentioned enough is Sean Tucker, a guy who is coming off a great year in 21, and honestly, for someone that was an All-American and the first-team All-ACC member in 2021, it is very odd how Sean Tucker doesn't get more credit going into 2022, or even is mentioned a lot as a top running back at that. Next up, the final player that I'm going to be talking about in today's video is Kansas defensive back Kenny Logan Jr. Kenny Logan Jr. is coming off a good 21 campaign, as in 12 games played he totaled 110 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 1 interception, 6 pass deflections, 1 fumble recovery, and 2 forced fumbles. He was also a force to be reckoned with in the kick return game as well. When talking about Kenny Logan Jr. heading into 2022, everyone knows about how good of a return man he really is, as he may be one of the best in college football right now. However, people need to put some more respect on his name as a defensive back as well, as he's coming off a great season, as I just mentioned, with all of his stats, as he was a key player to that Kansas defense, and probably even their best player on that Kansas defense at that. But heading into 2022, I feel like he's a player that has to be mentioned more. This is someone I feel like could potentially make a name for himself as one of the best in his position on the defensive side of the ball, and many people probably don't even know who Kenny Logan Jr. is if they're just a casual fan, as Kansas football, they're not the best team out there, and truthfully, they have not been a very good team at that, these past years being the punching bag of the Big 12 and the FBS level. But Kenny Logan Jr. is a name that everyone needs to know. This is a guy who plays high productive football on a very consistent level and is a bright spot for that Kansas Jayhawk team, and he's someone that needs to be looked at as one of the best in his position. Well guys, if you made it this far in the video, drop something down in the comment section below. Who else do you think is an underrated player heading into 2022? And before you head out, remember to smash that like button, turn on those post notifications, and subscribe if you haven't already. B. Kelly out.